You're listening to Words vs. Words with Friends podcast, a fun interactive podcast where we challenge your mind and perspective using everyday words and phrases. You haven't heard a podcast like this before. It's more than a discussion, it's a debate. Now let's join hosts Joeleen Santiago and Shemeka Montgomery for an all-new episode.
Hi, welcome to Words vs. Words with Friends podcast. This is a fun, interactive podcast where we challenge your mind and perspective using everyday words and phrases. Thank you so much for joining us. We missed you last week, but we're so happy that you can be with us. I'm your host, Joeleen Santiago, and I have my co-host here, Shemeka Montgomery.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for tuning in tonight to Words vs. Words with Friends. We have another awesome episode, and like Joe said, we missed you guys last week. So tonight we have excuse versus explanation. Words vs. Words with Friends is a podcast created to bring back the real art of conversation. We're going to create dialogue and also help you think outside the box. We're going to take a look at some scenarios and the definitions, and we want your feedback tonight. So for excuse, we have a reason or explanation put forward to defend or justify a fault or offense. And for explanation, we have a reason or justification given for an action or belief. So one question we want to look at tonight is which is used most often to avoid consequences. So Joe, what do you think? Which one do you think is used most often to avoid those consequences?
I think an excuse. I think people want to try to get out of, some type of consequence, or maybe they feel like they're going to get in trouble. So let me just use an excuse so that way I don't have to deal with the consequence. I can kind of get off the hook, sort of say.
Mm-hmm. So I do have to, I'm going with explanations tonight, but I do have to agree. I do think between the two, to avoid consequences, I think an excuse is used the most. We want to say hello to Monica, to all of our guests who are joining in. We ask that you would give us some feedback. Which one do you think is used most to avoid consequences? Hey, Mariah, good to see you. So glad to have you back. So I'll have to agree with you, Joe, on this one. I do think between the two, excuse is used more often to avoid those consequences.
Mm-hmm. And then guys, we also want you to not only just say excuse, but your reason why. If you say excuse, then bring an example. If you say explanation, bring an example. We want you to bring it tonight. Don't be easy on us. Just bring it hard.
Don't hold back. Don't
hold back. That's right. So definitely excuse. I see excuse being used a lot more often. You want to get off the hook, you know what I'm saying? So we're going to use an excuse. So during a vacation to Tennessee, I met two very nice young ladies. And so I asked them the question, which word is used more often to avoid consequences, which is, is it an excuse, an explanation? So we're going to go ahead and look at that clip real quick.
Hi, it's Joeleen from Words vs. Words with Friends podcast. I'm in Gatlinburg, Tennessee at Anakisa, and I have Aisha here with me. She's from Mississippi, and she's enjoying a girls' weekend. So I have a question for you, Aisha. Next week, we're talking about two words, excuse and explanation. Which word do you feel is used to avoid consequences?
I was thinking.
And why do you think?
Well, growing up without a great relationship with my dad, he was one to always tell me, well, if you need anything, if you need me help you with anything, you can always call me. So when I would, that was always an excuse. He would actually avoid the help that I needed. Yeah. And so we're not close at all. Oh, it's fine. I have one step there.
So there you go. There you have it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you so much for being here.
Hi, it's Joeleen from Words vs. Words with Friends podcast. I'm here at the island in Tennessee
and we're here at Bootlegger's Homemade Wine, and I have Gracie here with me. And Gracie, I just have one question for you. So during our podcast, it is excuse versus explanation. Which word do you feel is used mostly to avoid consequences?
I feel like excuses is more common.
Okay, and why do you say that?
I feel like an explanation is not always needed, but when you are in trouble, you feel like you need to give an excuse to kind of wiggle your way out of things. Excuse has a bit more urgency. Explanation is a little bit more likely.
So there you have Gracie's perspective, and she said it's excuse. So we thank you, Gracie, so much for your response, for your feedback. We appreciate it. Thank you for your perspective.
You're welcome.
You know, it's very interesting, Shemeka, is that they both picked excuse, but I was kind of just blown away by Aisha's response, because how many times do we meet somebody who says, you know what, I'll do anything to help you. I'm always going to be there for you. And then when you kind of hold them to the fire, and you kind of just hold them to what they were saying, then they offer up an excuse as to why they can't. So I was not expecting her response when it came to that. So that was just very interesting.
It is very interesting, because like she went on to say that she has a stepdad who has been there and has taken care of her. And I love the fact that that hasn't really affected her. She has somebody else in her life who's there to be there for her and to come through. So that's awesome. So Joe, we're going to look at the, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And then I wanted to say, with Gracie, her response, that's, we often try to avoid consequences a lot by offering excuses. But one thing that she says, that with an explanation, you don't always need a response, you know what I mean, for an explanation. So I thought, like, okay, yeah, I get that. I was like, okay, I can totally see that. But yeah, whenever we want to avoid getting into trouble, we use an excuse.
Yeah. And can we get that comment from Monica real quick? She says, I don't agree with Gracie. In those times, an explanation is needed. So thank you for that feedback, Monica. Joe, you want to go into the first scenario?
Let's go ahead and read what Mike said. Mike said, excuses because you may be able to avoid conflict quickly. When you kind of feel, and that's part of an excuse, is that you feel threatened or you feel attacked, so you go on the defense. And so when you feel like somebody's going to come at you, you want to hurry up and offer up an excuse just to kind of shut the other person up and kind of just, maybe just downplay the situation or scenario,
But for me, a lot of times I look at it as I want to give an explanation, because my thing is I want to almost give like a backstory as to the reason why, you know what I mean? So I'm just laying the ground. I'm like, look, this, and this happened. So this is the reason why. So I'm trying to explain so that it doesn't become an excuse. That's just in my opinion.
So we can get a better perspective. Let's look at it in a scenario perspective, for the first one, health conditions. So let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, for scenario one. So your doctor does some lab tests and sees that your A1C, which, is usually diabetic, your blood glucose is high, and suggests that you change your diet. You come back a few months later to see how your results have improved. The doctor asks you why your numbers have gone up, and you offer up the excuse, or you offer up the explanation or excuse, however you want to see it, that you couldn't go to the gym because of COVID restrictions, and so with the gym being closed and all that. So would this be an example of an excuse or an explanation?
So to me, I'm gonna say explanation. And the reason why is because, I understand that I needed to get my numbers down. I understand that I needed to work out. But because of COVID, the gym was closed. So I'm giving that explanation, because the thing is you don't want me to go to the gym and contract COVID. Then my health becomes even worse. So it even defeats the fact that I need to be working out and getting healthier, because if I have COVID, who knows what can happen. So to me, that's an example of explanation.
No, it's an excuse, because you can work out at home. Why can't you work out at home? Okay, the gyms are closed. Okay, you have a neighborhood. You can walk the neighborhood. I don't know if you live in an apartment complex. I mean, there's somewhere that you can walk or you can go to. You can even do exercises at home in your house. I mean, so to me, there is no excuse. When it comes to your health, there is no excuse as to why you can't take care of yourself. I mean, being diabetic is very serious. It's very serious. It's not something that you should play around with.
hmm Linda says, I do think more intellectual and analytical thinkers will probably use an explanation. Hmm. So that's interesting. Monica says that's not an explanation, that's an excuse.
Exactly. I
So
agree.
Mike says you can still work out at home. You don't necessarily
Exactly.
need expensive exercise equipment.
Mhm.
I hear you. I hear that it could be an excuse, but I also think it can be an explanation too, because you do have other factors when it comes to your health. And we all know that COVID is very serious. Not only COVID, but all these other things that are coming out, monkeypox and everything else. So it's
Mm.
like you don't want to be around an environment that may not be sanitized. At least if you're working out at home, you do know it will be sanitized. I have to give you
Mhm.
that. But if you're at a gym or somewhere else in a public place, you could contract, COVID or something else that's even worse to your health. So I can see how you could give an explanation.
But how can you give an explanation? What is the excuse to not going on the floor and doing some crunches or put on like YouTube? We can connect YouTube on our TV, you know what I'm saying? And we can put on some workout videos or, something is better than nothing. But I think if you're sitting at home being a couch potato and you watching TV, you got time to watch TV, you got time to work out.
And I understand that, Joe, but everybody's not the same. Everybody does not know how to work out or come up with different things to do. Everybody doesn't have the same stamina. The person might have other factors that are coming against them. They could have hurt
Mm.
themselves previously. We have to look at the fact that everybody's not the same physically. So we can't just automatically assume that they're lazy because they decided that they couldn't go to the gym because of COVID. There could be a lot of reasons that they decided not to go. So we need to look at those other factors too as why they can explain the reason for them not going to the gym. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
there's just a lot of reasons it could be.
um, no, you can get up and you can walk around the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? You
But what if
could.
they
Okay,
broke a leg or something?
but look, let me tell you this, Shamika. So I was one of those people who during COVID, I didn't work out, but I knew I was having problems, and I could speak on this because I started having problems with my blood sugar. And I went to the doctor, and I'm a living testimony of this, right? I went to my doctor, right? And so my blood work, my A1C was a little bit too high. And so I knew I needed to do some type of plan or something. So I knew I needed to work out. I actually started working out during COVID. I did. And I started putting videos on at home and I started working out. So to me, I felt that that was the perfect opportunity because you know what? You don't have to race to work. You don't have to get up early to go to work. A lot of us were working at home, so I felt that that was a perfect opportunity. So I took a bad situation, and I turned it around for good and used it for my advantage. And I think that when you can't do that or you choose not to do that, I think that you're using an excuse. And I think that when it comes to your health, there really should not be any excuse.
And Joe, I get that, but let's just say that you were taking care of someone who was elderly or who was sick at home. Then no, you probably wouldn't go out to the gym and exercise because of COVID. You don't want to bring that home to the person that you're taking care of. So that's what I'm saying. When it comes to COVID and how our world is today, like we're doing things that we probably didn't have to do in the past. We might be having to take care of a parent or someone who is elderly in our home, and we have to protect them at all costs from getting even sicker. So yeah, I get it that it can be seen as an excuse, but there could be other factors as to the reason why I did not go to the gym to work out.
Mm. So Linda says sometimes people are struggling with mental health concerns and they can push themselves to exercise. Definitely. For me, I will say that I did get COVID at one point, and I did had to mentally get myself because um being enclosed you have four walls, you see four walls all day, it can take a toll on you when you're locked up in your room, you know what I'm saying, and you don't have any interaction with anybody. It does take a toll on your mind, and then you just you become depressed, or you start starting to feel a certain way. So I had to turn it around and say, you know what, I'm not going to let depression take a hold of me. I am going to get on this floor and I'm going to work out. I'm going to do sit-ups. I'm going to open up my lungs so that I can still continue and be able to breathe. So I did not use COVID as an excuse, or even contracting COVID. I did not even use that as an excuse not to work out. So I still continued on because I knew it was important for my health.
That's awesome, Joe. And Mike says, what if the individual had a life-altering medical situation? I can't work out as much as I did prior to my hospitalization. Mike, exactly. That's the thing. We have to look at those other factors that could be hindering that person. Back to what Linda said about the mental health issues. I can speak on that. Your girl right here straight struggles with depression. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, sometimes it's just an effort just to get out of the bed. Like, a lot of times you don't understand it until you go through it. But yeah, there's so many other reasons as to why you did not have a chance to go and work out at the gym. Some people just don't even believe in themselves. You know what I'm saying? They're like, I've been this way forever. What is me going to the gym? What is that going to do? Some people don't know how to work out at the gym. Some people are afraid to talk to other people and they're very isolated. So they don't want to ask for help. So there's just so many other reasons as to why the person may not have gone to the gym, even though it probably was for the best to improve their lab results. There's just a lot of factors that could play into it.
Yeah, but you know what? I literally watched a person, who at one time was able to walk, I literally watched this person become so overweight that they could no longer walk. They could no longer stand on their own 2 feet. And I'm sorry, but I don't ever want to get to the point. And I understand that we have struggles sometimes, physically or, health wise. I do understand that. But sometimes, your body can hold a lot. You can push your body to do a lot. And the human body is amazing because you can push yourself and your body can endure that. But when you get to the point where you just take no precautions or nothing to take care of your body, then now you're to the point that you can't even walk anymore. I think that that's a problem. And I think that maybe perhaps they may have used an excuse in the beginning that maybe they just didn't feel like it. And I know, Shemeka, you said, being lazy. I know you did say, you brought that up, but that's true. Maybe perhaps a person was lazy at one time and just decided hey, it's not important.
That's true. Could be.
We had a response up on the screen. Can we go ahead and show that again? Diet is essential piece along with exercise. That is so true, Monica. That is so true. I had when I was just looking up, because I'm very concerned with diabetes and everything, and kind of like being like having issues with my blood sugar and all that, and trying to maintain that. I kind of looked up some information. So I went to Diabetic News. And I found, this was very interesting, I found that in 2014, the last time that they had ran some statistics on the United States, I found that 10% of the U.S. population has diabetes, and it continues to go up. So I was just like, wow, 10% of the U.S. population. Really, that's a lot if you think about that. And then also half of the population has diabetes or pre-diabetes. That is a very high number. And I think that if we don't start to control it, and I think that if we don't stop using excuses, that it can really get out of hand. You know what I'm saying?
I agree, because I have type 2. I know a lot of people have type 1. So that is a high number. 10% is very high. And I think a lot of people have it and don't even know. A lot of times they don't even know the symptoms, or they don't have any symptoms. So when they find out that they do have it, they're kind of shocked, because a lot of people just think, oh, it's type 2 is because you're eating this, your cholesterol is high. A lot of times it's just your genetics. You know what I'm saying? It couldn't even be what you're eating. You could be healthy, working out all the time, and still be diabetic.
But also in that same article, it said that it was due, they said a diabetes was due to poor diet and lack of exercise is what they found. So genetics was not even playing a part. They found that in this study that it was due to not eating properly, a poor diet, and then not exercising. So I think that if we're made more aware of it, you know what I'm saying, then we can take the precautions to be able to live a more healthier lifestyle.
I agree.
So we're going to go ahead and we are going to take a commercial break, but we will be back on Words versus Words with Friends podcast.
So Tiffany says, but you're still gaining a positive outcome with the college choice. So I still say persuasion. I get that, Tiffany, but what if your child isn't supposed to go to college? Because if we really look at it, sometimes I look back and think, why did I even go to college? Because all I have is debt now. And, you know, maybe that wasn't the best choice for me. And I think sometimes parents, they do want things for their kids that they think is the best. But what if it's not?
Let's be honest, though. You know, when we were young, we didn't always know what we wanted when we were young. I mean, if I were to go back years back, I'm pretty sure I would make different choices. And I'm pretty sure that if I had my parents somehow persuading me, hey, look at these are your different options, or even just tell me about their life growing up, like their experiences, to kind of help encourage me to maybe make different types of choices in my life, then I think. Welcome back to Words versus Words with Friends podcast. That was a clip from our last episode, Persuasion versus Manipulation. You can go ahead and check out that full episode on Facebook at WvWWF or any major podcast platform.
Yep. So Linda says, so are mental health concerns considered an excuse or being lazy?
I personally, I know that people really do have issues, you know, and I'm not taking that lightly, you know what I'm saying? I had, because I know Shemeka brought it up before, but I had dealt with depression in the past. But one thing that I will say is that I chose to not let it beat me up or get me down. So for me, I felt that it was a choice to get up and do something about it. I'm not gonna let it consume me, you know. But I do really just do believe that people do have issues, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're lazy. You know, it just means that they have a little bit more that they need to do to overcome the issues that they're facing. You know, I wouldn't say that that's lazy, but I think if you're capable, I feel like if your arms are working, your legs are working, and your body is fine and everything's good, I don't think that there should be any excuse as to why you can't exercise or work out. Even just walk and just do a little bit at a time. That's all it takes. A little bit.
That's good, Joe. So we're going to go into scenario number 2. So for scenario 2, we have no longer attending church. So you have a friend, they come to you and they ask you, why do you no longer attend church anymore? And you respond, well, I do go to church. I attend online. I don't go to the physical building. And the reason that I don't is because growing up, I felt like I was manipulated, persuaded. You can go back and check out the episode from our last episode. I was manipulated or persuaded into going to church all the time. And so now I attend online. I don't go to the actual physical building. So, Joe, do you consider that an excuse or an explanation?
For me, I personally see that as an excuse, because I mean, in that person's mind, they may be justified. So to them, it may be justifiable. But for me, I think that that's an excuse, because when I look at it from a biblical standpoint, you know, where it says to not to forsake the assembling of each other, but you know, just to come together so that you can encourage each other, pretty much. So when you're doing that, you need the encouragement of other Christians. You need the encouragement of each other. I don't see you getting that behind 4 walls. You might be discouraged. You know, the Spirit might be moving. You might need a touch from God. It's different when you're at home than when you're at a physical location at a church.
Okay, so Joe, I hear that. I think the reason I think about this question is because I don't attend church like I used to. So I do attend online. I can agree. I think it's good to be in an assembly with other people. But when we look at that, a lot of times there's a lot of reasons that people aren't attending the physical building. We could go back to the whole thing about COVID. We could go back to all these other things that are going on in today's society. Some people feel a little bit safer attending online. I hear what you're saying. You know, you have the community, you want to touch from God, but I know that God can touch me anywhere. The Holy Spirit is everywhere. So I think a lot of times when we look at that, there's a lot of reasons that the person may not be going to a physical church. A lot of reasons. And I think one of them could be church hurt. There could be some situations that they have dealt with that keeps them from attending a physical building, and they just want to do online now.
But I get that, Shemeka, but you know what, if it's we go to our job, we don't have a reason why we skip out on our job. You know what I mean? Because guess what, we're getting paid. You don't go to work, guess what, you don't get paid. You know what I'm saying? So if we can faithfully go to a building or a location to earn money for employment, like, to me, I think going to church maybe once or twice a week shouldn't be a problem. And then you talked about church hurt. How many times do our coworkers hurt us on the job? And guess what? We still show up for our paycheck. I mean, I'm just putting it out there. I'm just saying, because I mean, I've been wronged at my job several times, but guess what? I still show up to work. So to me, not attending church for those reasons would be an excuse. I don't know. What do you guys think on Facebook? I mean, if you're tuning in live, what do you guys think?
Linda says, can a person make a choice and give an explanation for that choice without it being judged as an excuse? I think it depends on the person's perspective, because some people's going to look at everything you say as an excuse, and you might look at everything you say as an explanation. So I think it's about the perspective.
No, because if you think about explanation, though, I mean, you're explaining something, right? Where an excuse, you're trying to get out of something. You're on the defense. I think, like, you're offended in some way, and so you're trying to get out of somebody maybe criticizing you, or maybe somebody judging you. So that can very much be true. But I don't think that it just depends, I think, on the situation. I don't agree, Shemeka, that you said that certain people can look at everything as an excuse. I don't think so. It just depends on whatever the situation is.
So Mike says work hurt versus church hurt, not even a sensible comparison. So when it comes to church hurt, I think it's super deep, because we're talking spiritual. I mean, we're talking about people who are supposed to be our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so they're supposed to be there to lift us up and encourage us. So that church hurt, I think, is something that goes pretty deep, because you are bonded as Christ followers. You know what I mean? They're there to encourage you and be there beside you, lift you up when you are weak. So I think the church hurt is a lot deeper than if something happens on your job, because you're on your job, you got to put up with it, because you got to make some money to live. You know what I mean? But when it comes to the church, that's something that's encouraging you spiritually. And so I think that hurts a lot deeper, because these are people that you trust, that you look up to. You may see them as a spiritual father, mother, sister, brother, whatever. And somebody that can relate to you on different levels of your life, not just a coworker who is there to relate to you on a job. You know what I mean?
But you have coworkers too that profess or confess that they're Christians, and they still can do you wrong.
That's
so
true.
I think it can be no matter where you go, because Christians are not just in church. We work with them too, and they can very much do wrong to us too. They can lie on you at the job. And they can lie and say you did something that you didn't do. So, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes it can hurt you to see those people every day. But you have to.
True.
You have to. And I think sometimes it can be, you can hate going to your job.
That's true. And I think when it comes to making or talking about an explanation of not attending church, there could be so many different reasons. I think for me, I've learned that it's more about a relationship than actual rituals or traditions. I'm not saying that attending church is not good to be in the physical building, but I just have experienced the love of Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit in my own living room through the TV. You know what I'm saying? So I do feel like, especially for people who are handicapped, who are disabled, who cannot leave the physical apartment or house to go to church physically. A lot of them don't have a choice but to attend online. You know, even before COVID happened and everything was pushed online, as far as churches and meetings and things, there were other programs that would come on, you know, Billy Graham and all of those that would come on and people would watch from home. So I think it can maybe not be the same, but I think it can be as effective. And sometimes you could balance between the two. Maybe you go a few, you know, times a month and the other times you watch online.
I mean, sometimes you just need a hug. You just need
True.
somebody to say, "I love you." You know, you may not
Mm-hmm.
get that at home. Is you know what I'm saying? Is just
It's
people
true.
to say, "Hey, I appreciate you. I love." It's great to see you. You know, you don't get that at home. Or there have been times that I've really been going through, you know, in life, and I just really just needed people just to pray for me. If I isolated myself at home, I don't get the same type of prayers, or even if I isolate myself at home, I don't even talk about my problems to them. So they have no idea that I'm going through. But when I'm sitting at church, you know, somebody might be like, you know what, I feel her spirit. I feel that she's going through. Let me go ahead and go over there and pray for her. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I do realize that there are certain health conditions that do keep people, prohibit people from going to church, you know. And I'm not just saying, you know, I'm not that right there. That's an explanation as to why they can't go. But if you, for me, I just don't, I'm not going to be concerned about what other people think about me, whether if they're talking about me in church or not. I'm not going to use that as an excuse not to go to church.
I get that. It's just, I guess I feel like when it comes to the church hurt, you know, it's those people that you feel that were the closest to you and you were so vulnerable and you laid yourself out there. And so when you experience that hurt, it's a little bit devastating, you know, like it kind of just really does something to you. And sometimes you tend to back away from it and you start to go online. And I think if that's happened, a lot of times it is good for you maybe to go online just for a little bit so that you could get some healing and then maybe you could go back to the physical building.
Guys, we thank you so much if you're tuning in tonight. We thank you so much for your feedback. We thank you for your perspective. We want you to keep on bringing it, keep on bringing it. We're really enjoying this conversation. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sharon, for joining in. I see you, that's my friend. Hi, Sharon. So yeah, I understand that. I get that. There's been a time I've been hurt and I've been out of church for 6 years. You know what I'm saying? For me, that was the most being out of church. I felt like I didn't have a purpose. I felt like I wasn't because I'm very involved and very engaged in church. I'm very involved. I do work. I feel like kingdom work to me is number one priority. And so being out of church for the 6 years because I was hurt and I was afraid to go back, to me, I felt like it was just tearing at me inside. I had to go back. I
Mhm.
had to. So I think for my peace of mind, it was something that I really needed to do. And you could, you know, you'll feel that conviction within yourself.
That's good, Joe. That's good
Mhm.
that you can come from that perspective too. Do you
Yeah.
want to go into
Yeah.
the third scenario?
Let's go ahead. Let's
Okay,
bring
so
it.
the third one, we're going to talk about reasons for a divorce. So
Mm.
when it comes to divorce, Joe, this is good. I believe this was one of your thoughts. So when it comes to divorce, do you think that there are reasons that we come up with or things that we make justifiable
Mm.
for reasons to get a divorce? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow. Uh, I think it depends on what the reason is. Because if you are just saying, "I'm tired of being married, I'm going to check out, I want to get a divorce." To me, that's an excuse. For me, I feel like when you're married, that is a commitment. That is a commitment to the person that you're marrying, and it is a commitment between you and God as well. So I don't. That's not something that I take lightly. So for me to even say I want to have a divorce, it doesn't matter what the reason is. I think I wanna stay in and fight a little bit harder.
Well, I think a lot of people try to use different explanations when it comes to getting a divorce. I think there could be a plethora of reasons. It could be that you have gained weight, and so now they're like,
Mm,
"Oh, I'm not attracted to you anymore." I mean, it could be the way that they treat you now. It's not the same. I think when it comes to divorce, yeah, we can come up with all kinds of excuses or explanations,
mm,
whichever one we want to choose as to why. I do agree with you. I believe that if you are married, you should do the most that you can to stay married. But there are situations when you have to leave, of course. But yeah, I think we do come up with those excuses.
Right. So, like you said, the main question is justifiable. Is it justifiable as to the reason why you want to get a divorce? In this, in this situation, guys, what do you think? Do you think getting a divorce? Do you think that it would be an excuse? Is it an explanation? Which one is justifiable in this case? Sharon says that's a tough one to discuss depending on your perception. So I totally agree. I think experience too plays a part. Experience until you've really gone through it. You really don't know what you can handle as a person, what you're willing to accept, what you are willing to, I guess, what's going to push your buttons, I guess, ultimately, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes my patience may be different than your patience, and what I'm willing to tolerate and what I'm willing to accept may be different than you. But I think that gaining weight, it happens. We change. We're not going to look the same like 20 years later into the marriage, or even 5 years later. I mean, we have kids, our body stretches. It happens. There's no reason, no excuse, unconditional love. You know what I'm saying? You love the person unconditionally. So I don't think that would be or should be an excuse for divorce. I believe that there's really just one, or I would say for me, there would be two reasons why I would get a divorce. Adultery, and then again, abuse. Those are the two things that I would think. But anything else, I think, is just like, you know what I'm saying?
But let me ask you this, Joe. Do you think as women, a lot of times that we make excuses or explanations as to why we should stay in it, and then maybe the guy might come up with excuses or explanations why he should leave? Do you think that women try to hold on a little bit longer than men do sometimes?
I can't put it in a women versus man type of thing, because you got some men who are willing to stick it out. You got some men who are willing to work and give their all and fight their all to make that marriage work. And then you have some women who just be like, "See ya, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore." So it just depends on the person.
Yeah, and that's why I asked, because I agree too. I think it depends on each individual person and their perspective, even on how they grew up and how they see marriage, how they view marriage, how they've seen it played out in their parents' lives or friends. I think sometimes they get into the marriage and they think, okay, this is gonna be cool, and then it turned into something different because some things weren't discussed beforehand, and so then they're shocked and they're like, oh, well, you don't do this, and this, and I don't like when you do this, and this, and then there's so much friction, and then they come up with the explanation or excuse as to why they want to get divorced. So
I think sometimes too, when we talk about faithfulness and being committed, I think that we tend to accept a lot or deal with a lot because we want to be faithful and we want to be committed. And I think that if we don't stick through it during the hard times, that we are less than a person. You know what I mean? That we kind of view ourselves like dirt, we get embarrassed, because hey, if I leave, then I don't feel like I'm being committed or faithful. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
I get that. And I think sometimes we end up staying longer than we should have. I think if we continue to stay even longer when we should have went ahead and got out of it, I think it can cause more damage to our self-esteem, to our confidence, to the way that we view ourselves, period. Like you said, sometimes we start to feel less than. Like I failed at this. You know what I mean? Even though you didn't, sometimes you feel that way. So yeah.
But look at it this way. I wouldn't look at it that way, Shemeka. I would look at it this way. Look at it as, you know what? You did all that you could. At the end of the day, you don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel ashamed, because at the end of the day, you did everything that you could. You did everything in your power to make it work. So I don't think that you would be held accountable for getting a divorce. You know what I'm saying? It's a work of two people. Two people should be committed 100%.
I agree. But what if you use the explanation that you feel like you've grown apart?
No, I don't agree with that. And guys, if you're tuning into Facebook, you can go ahead and kind of help us out on that, because for me personally, I don't think that growing apart is an excuse, because you should be growing together. If you're, you know what I'm saying, you should be experiencing life together. Like, what is your ultimate goal in this, in marriage?
That's awesome. Sharon says, I learned that marriage is for mature people. And if you're not mature or ready to handle a marriage, then you shouldn't be in it. Now, when you get a divorce, that means that there's something there that has caused you to feel like the relationship you're dealing with your spouse is no longer important. Your excuse could be, I don't want to do this anymore because it's too much work. However, your explanation can be, at the end of the day, I'm doing most of the work in the relationship. So it depends. Sharon, thank you so much for that comment. You are so right. That's really, really good.
Yeah, you got to be ready. You know, when you get married, you definitely have to be ready. If you're not ready, you shouldn't get married. I believe, because then you can avoid all those excuses. You know what I'm saying? You can avoid all of that excuse and explanation. If you're just not ready, or if you have hesitations or reservations about it, just don't do it. If it's a second thought, or you have a question in your mind, just don't. And then you can avoid all of these excuses and explanations of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because with a marriage, you have to be ready for it, and it takes that commitment. It takes that sacrifice when you're in that marriage, because you're committed to that person. And the example I was saying about growing apart, I think you have to do things to grow together, like you said. You have to find things that you have in common, or things you don't have in common. Something you can introduce to your spouse maybe that they didn't know about. You know, there's so many ways to improve on the relationship and to enhance the marriage. It's a lot of work. It
takes work. You got to be willing to put in the work, put in the effort. Definitely, 100%. Guys, we thank you so much for tuning in this evening. We thank you for your perspective. We thank you, Mariah, thank you for joining in. Mike, thank you again for your comments, your perspective. Monica, thank you. Sharon, thank you. If I missed anybody, please do not charge it to my heart, charge it to my mind. I'm sorry, but we thank you so much. You make Words versus Words with Friends podcast so much better. We could not do it alone. We cannot do it without you. Shemeka, last thoughts, last comments?
So last comments, excuse and explanation, those are both reasons that you could give. I think it just depends on the person's perspective, or it's the situation like Joe said. Sometimes it can be an excuse, sometimes it can be an explanation. We want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. You can follow me on Mika at Mika Lives on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook, Shemeka Montgomery.
You can follow me on Joeleen Vasquez on both Instagram and Facebook. You can follow Words versus Words with Friends podcast on Facebook at WvWWF. And we also have a new Instagram page at WvWWF podcast. You can check out our past episodes on Facebook, and also on any major podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We want you to remember that Words versus Words with Friends podcast is more than a discussion, it's a debate. We'll see you next week. You've been watching Words versus Words with Friends podcast, brought to you by Next 15 Podcast Productions. If you would like to support the podcast, go to next15podcast.com and click the Buy Me Coffee tab, where we will receive your donations of any size. Thank you in advance and for watching the podcast. We will see you next week.